Tears of the Kingdom is a game that enraptures and takes you away. A lot of it is pure escapism, much like its predecessor, Breath of the Wild. It adds elements that can be really fun for some, but endlessly frustrating for others. An advance warning that there may be spoilers, and this review is quite critical, but only because I really feel Nintendo has done so much well with the game, and yet it is not without its problems. While I've genuinely enjoyed this game, I don't think it's fair to pretend it's flawless, and I've been very surprised by just how many reviews overwhelmingly ignore what I consider drawbacks in terms of overall enjoyment and experience. To be clear, my review expresses only my own personal opinions. It is intended as a polite critique for a game that does some really impressive things, and that I do still really like. My aim here is to strike balance and not excuse things that I feel could have been addressed to enhance the game further. It is a strong follow-up to Breath of the Wild, and good overall as a title of its caliber, but not Game of the Year, much less greatest of all time, as some have been touting, compared with other offerings out there. I'll start with what I liked. Nintendo is in the business of fun for all ages, and there's something so incredibly charming about how they do it that makes every single one of their games easy to get into. Tears of the Kingdom is no exception. It has the makings of a truly epic journey. Nintendo seems to effortlessly spin a game that is just intrinsically enjoyable and motivating. They understand how to make a game give you that feeling of being far away from ordinary life. I will even begrudgingly admit that they've successfully gamified to-do lists, inventory management, and task completion in titles like this, making even the most mundane fetch quests feel somehow important to advancing the plot and building relationships with the people of Hyrule. Also, the Yiga clan. These guys are just relentlessly fun, goofy, and I can't get enough of their ridiculous leader, Master Koga. They're back to their usual ambitious plotting, but this time in the depths. A gorgeous subterranean landscape that mirrors the world above in its layout. You'll have to venture down here for quite a number of quests, coming across dangerous hideouts and surprising new enemies, including a quest that gives you a special ability following a lengthy Yiga encounter. It is exactly because Nintendo already understands and does all of this so well that I was actually a bit disappointed with some of the execution in Tears of the Kingdom. Let's get into the meat of it. Starting off with the fact that the Switch cannot keep up anymore with hardware going on 7 years old and very low RAM. Unfortunately, the Switch was already pretty underpowered and barely passable at release, and that means that it's aged like milk. Nintendo does an extremely good job of optimizing games so that they work reasonably well on their proprietary console, but that just doesn't excuse it. If anything, we should treat Tears of the Kingdom as being the only big kid on the block for Nintendo, as every other major developer has moved well beyond the constraints this console presents. In some ways, it feels like Nintendo is the kid that gloats at beating you in a game after giving you the bad controller with a broken button while they spam you with the only attack they know how to perform. I'm going to make a clear distinction at this point between graphic performance and aesthetic quality, as they are quite different. Tears of the Kingdom unsurprisingly adopts the same gorgeous aesthetic that triggered a cascade of copycat mobile games looking to cash in on what was a very unique animation style when Breath of the Wild was first released. But despite the undeniably beautiful landscape and world, it is precisely because of the popularity that this aesthetic inspired that I didn't find much exciting or unique about the look of this latest entry in the franchise. It remains just as beautiful, perhaps with some new biomes and areas, but there just isn't that wow moment for me, save for a few cutscenes that really motivated me to free roam all over the map like with the first entry, because everything starts to feel too familiar past the tutorial area. The aesthetic is still stunning and very fun to take in, but graphically, there's broken lines, low density that makes things feel much chunkier and older, just not really what I expected to be paired with such an iconic aesthetic. It is impressive that the Nintendo team was able to make such a massive and ambitious game work so well on a 7-year-old piece of hardware, again, speaking to the ingenuity of their optimization, But the fact that an emulator can significantly outpace a brand new game's native hardware is not a good look when you're asking for this type of AAA investment at $70 USD or $90 Canadian. I found myself getting very task-focused early in the game, and this was where I started experiencing other downsides. People who were not a fan of the durability mechanic in Breath of the Wild will find no reprieve here, as it's officially turned up to 11. Because the storyline introduces a new element called corruption that makes weapons even less durable, anyone who likes collecting cool weapons won't have that opportunity. I can't tell you how many times I was frustrated when I took my last swing at an enemy and my favorite fused or regular weapon just shattered, or how many times I'd face a high-powered enemy only to have to run away, desperately hoping it wouldn't take a massive swing because I've lost every weapon in my inventory trying to hack away at its HP. Even with strategy, bombs, and different weapon types, some of them are absolute tanks. It was this element alone that was wholly responsible for me hopping onto the farming glitch bandwagon for more attachments to fit to weapons once I found good combinations, or to try and farm for items and things I could sell for rupees to allow me to upgrade my gear, and just buy things without having to think twice or stop what I'm doing in the story to grind a ridiculous amount for a pretty mediocre reward. But we couldn't even be allowed glitches to alleviate our frustrations with weapon durability. Nintendo makes sure these glitches are patched with each update released, removing each and every tool at our disposal shortly after it is discovered. Let's talk about the obstacles in the world around you. At times, I found myself really disliking the Ultra Hand feature, as these newer puzzles felt totally disruptive to what should have been a fully immersive experience, exploring the world around you. You're checking out the landscape and all of a sudden find you have to solve a puzzle or throw together some contraption that often defies the laws of physics just because? Reasons? This really took me out of experiencing the story and its main quests. Although there is one area where you experience low gravity, and that is really fun and unexpected. Plus points for that. You're roaming the countryside, maybe even on a horse that refuses to step over even the most slightly inconvenient terrain, and all of a sudden, a little voice catches your attention. You see a tiny creature struggling with a giant pack on its back, like an overturned turtle. It's a Korok. It needs help getting to its friend, which is of course located completely in the opposite direction that you need to go. This is cute and makes you feel really helpful the first time or two, but it gets old fast, even if you have fond memories of visiting the Korok forest in Breath of the Wild. Most people will just start to ignore the Koroks unless they really need the seed reward, but others have gotten very creative about catapulting these little guys into the stratosphere, or otherwise torturing them out of sheer contempt for them beyond that. Lastly, being able to essentially take a break to go into your inventory, no matter the situation, can be a really positive attribute for people who need a minute to process what they're doing and to strategize accordingly, especially in bigger boss fights. For me, again, it just kind of disrupted the flow. Rather than having more quick-mapped buttons or customized controls to keep combat fluid, action largely felt staggered in this adventure. All of these things combined made me put the game down and walk away for days on end just to take a break as I did my playthrough. Fetch, return, rinse, repeat. Farm, exchange, rinse, repeat. Break weapons, scramble to find something or build something half decent, rinse, repeat. Shrine, puzzle, rinse. You get the idea. Moving on to the story. It is pretty good, with visually interesting characters, but it's not what I'd call masterful. It is repetitive, derivative, overly simplified, predictable, and in a world where most games are now fully voice-acted, I don't feel that making the decision to limit this feature to specific scenes is really an endearing quality. It feels like they didn't want to spend or do what it takes to go the extra mile, and they had 6 years. In my opinion, A game with this many reused assets coming out as a sequel should not have taken 6 years to complete, when massive games like Baldur's Gate took the same length of time and offer a totally immersive, highly ambitious player experience at a lower price point. It borders on insulting to the fanbase, and I know that sounds harsh. I just feel that Nintendo fans deserve more, and I firmly count myself among them. Objectively, something like Starfield or Red Dead Redemption 2, even Cyberpunk 2077 with all of its bugs, are much better games, and the flack these other developers catch for small nitpicks while performing leagues ahead of Nintendo illustrates just how much of a pass we give Nintendo, and maybe just how much we're caught up in Stockholm Syndrome. Other games are crucified on launch, but God forbid anyone so much as look at Nintendo funny. It begs the question, would anyone be as hyped and as willing to overlook these issues if Tears of the Kingdom were on any other console, made by any other developer, going by any other name, rather than being Nintendo's latest darling? And yet, in spite of all this, how does Nintendo keep me coming back for more? Here's the thing. The common element is that it appeals to the inner child in many ways. It brings me right back to being 10 years old, making a new discovery, exploring a fantastical world that stimulates the imagination, and getting away from the mundane in a very pure way that is truly friendly for most ages. In this case, it's colorful, it has a ton of variety in tasks, landscape, tools, NPCs, you name it. You're on a quest to save someone important and restore balance to the world, which makes you super important while playing as Link. You feel drawn into their world, with characters that may seem a little flat to some tastes, but are ultimately somewhat enchanting, and the simple story makes it easier for younger players and those who are just looking for a less complex story to stay engaged with the content. No messy politics to play, no moral alignment to worry about, just move about as you see fit. Cooking and crafting mechanics feel exciting. You're making a new discovery and experimenting with how to get the highest stat yield for different elixirs and meals, but there are limits to the highest bonuses that can be obtained during a blood moon. Dressing Link up for different environments is also fun, and some of the side quests are even more involved and entertaining than the main quests. Honestly, while I don't enjoy a lot of this game's construction elements, there are many people who really do, and are driven to create impressive new things to complete tasks, or just to totally eviscerate enemies with giant Zonai war machines for fun. For many of them, this game has high entertainment and replay value because of all the different combinations they can try over and over again. I get the appeal, it just feels to me like the story could have been fleshed out with a little more detail, more mainline quests, and fewer distracting minigame type setups. I've heard other reviewers with critical perspectives mention this game could have been some iteration of Nuts and Bolts. I agree that there are similarities, and that for some like myself, this can cheapen the narrative of the actual game. But for others, it's one of the elements that adds a fresh spin on top of an already beloved base game. And that is what makes a good sequel to them. All of the building, fusing, crafting, and upgrading, that just doesn't feel like the polished traditional RPG epic that was being pitched to me. It's like having most of your game being made up of minigames, while the main story takes a backseat and becomes the side quest. But that might actually be exactly what someone else wants in a game. A ton of variety, options to complete tasks, and collect memories totally out of order, and not feeling any particular obligation to do anything specific to advance the story. Even with all of the things that personally frustrated me, I'm giving Tears of the Kingdom a total score of 7 out of 10. It is enjoyable, but this just doesn't take the crown for me for Game of the Year, not while it's recycling so much, competing against other major titles that look and perform so much better, and Nintendo is commanding AAA pricing for a game that objectively offers less than half of a comparable title's value in terms of actually original content. I just can't give them a pass on that. The repetitive nature of having to hunt down weapons and revisit locations countless times just to farm items that are necessary to advance the plot only aggravate what I felt were the game's most discouraging attributes. As for Nintendo, 5 out of 10 for high asset reuse and relatively little original content in recent years. And for the love of God, please give us a substantial update with the Switch 2 release. I want to keep loving all things Nintendo, as I grew up with them, and they've always been dear to my heart. Nintendo has always been capable of amazing, joyful content. I know that they can still dazzle us. There's just a few missing ingredients right now to capture the attention of generations to come. But for them to get better, we need to demand better as consumers. Stop giving them a free pass for things that are objectively laughable in this 2023, the year of our Lord. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, maybe even appreciated the critique, please consider a like and subscribe. Bye for now.